Hi, I'm Chris Palmore, and welcome to Grad Space Radio. I'm coming to you from Louisville, Kentucky, but I've got my partner, my productive accent, my friend, Peter Williams, coming from Hong Kong. How you doing, Peter?
Doing well, thanks, Chris. I think it's morning your time in Kentucky. It's evening in Hong Kong. We're exactly 12 hours apart, and this is great fun, just continuing this series of conversations. We've got two really interesting people that we get to introduce to each other and to our audience this evening. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm excited too, and I just had the thought: isn't it going to be crazy one day when we're in the same room doing this in the same time zone? That's going to be pretty freaking exciting.
I'm looking forward to giving you a tour of Hong Kong and where our guests are coming from. I don't know if Bobsy's literally there this evening, but definitely Josianne is. Llama Island, which is a short ferry ride from the city. You've got that great backdrop of the main part of Hong Kong here, but not too far away in a few ferries, you get to experience a completely different lifestyle. And maybe Bobsy and Josianne can give us a taste of that as we go through. I mean, just for context, this is a collaboration between Chris and I. He has a program called Gratitude Space Radio, and I wrote a book about productive accidents of serendipity. How we met was a series of, productive accidents, and these conversations are a continuation of that. And we'll learn more about Chris's work and some of the books that he's published, and the friends that have contributed to those books, which are a series of essays focused on gratitude. So maybe we can bring on Bobsy and Josianne and kick it off.
Yeah, let's bring them in. Welcome. We got a full house.
Hello.
Hi.
Perfect 4 quadrants square going on here. So, one of the things I think is going to be interesting because, first of all, Bobsy and Josianne haven't met until today, even though I think you're going to become lifelong friends pretty quickly, maybe by the end of this episode. And I think the best way to do that is maybe to share your stories. So maybe Josianne, do you want to sort of kick it off and share, how did you get to where you're living right now and tell us some of the highlights?
How do you get to live where I'm living right now? Basically, actually, a lifelong set of adventures and introspection. And actually, bizarrely enough, I've been wanting to live on a little island since I was about 8 years old. I had this idea of adventure, Treasure Island. In those days it was a book rather than a movie, and I just had that idea of living on an island being just absolutely amazing. And I got to do that earlier this year, and I can confirm that it was worth the wait. It was worth the wait.
And where are you from originally? Where did you grow up, and how did you end up in Hong Kong, etc.?
Okay, so I'm originally from Belgium in Europe. I'm actually a third culture kid myself. My parents left Belgium when I was about 7 years old. We moved to Nigeria. We went to Canada, Morocco, Pakistan. They dropped me off to Belgium to boarding school for a few years in the meantime. And I think the easiest, where my head is at now, I've got to say, is probably I'm citizen of the world. I don't have a sense of a nationality anymore, a place where I'm from. It's just I'm from here, basically.
Right.
In terms of what took me to Hong Kong, my very first job was in financial services, working with back office teams, and the most fun of them were from Hong Kong. And we used to chat, as one does, and they used to tell me about the life in Hong Kong. And I vowed, when I was 26, that one day I will live here, and here I am.
And you've been here how long?
I've been in Hong Kong for 8 years. Do you want me to tell you how I got to come to Hong Kong? Would that
Absolutely.
be? Okay. So basically, as I said, I'm a third culture kid. So was my ex-husband. And I loved that status, that way of life. He didn't quite enjoy it as much. And I always wanted to give that opportunity to our children. And we lived for about 13 years in Scotland, and I had been chipping at him, several times, thinking, well, wouldn't it be great if we lived abroad? Wouldn't it be great for the children? And he would have none of it. And then in 2013, I became a contractor, a freelancer in the UK, which means that effectively, you've got a lot of freedom in terms of when and where you work. And I thought, right, I'll have it one more shot before the children are too old. And Gavin at the time, bless him, said, well, I tell you what, how about you just stop your contract? You go to Hong Kong for about 3 weeks between Chinese New Year and Easter. And if you find a job that will allow us all to move to Hong Kong and for me to be able to kind of get my bearings within the first 3 months, we will move there. If you don't find a job that sustains us, I don't want to hear about moving abroad ever again in my life. And well, we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. So that was serendipity or determination or a bit of both. I don't know. But interesting enough, he's still here as well. The children are now abroad at university, and actually Hong Kong has been good to us as a family, for sure.
And when you found Lama, did you recognize that as your treasure island as soon as you realized
No,
it was there?
not immediately. Not immediately. In fact, I didn't quite like the main street. I mean, Bobsy will know it quite well. So Lama is a small island of the main Hong Kong island. It's a pedestrian island. It's got 8,000 people living here. But I'm sure that about 20 years ago, it would have been extremely different. And it is actually quite crowded as small islands go, certainly for my liking. So the first time I went to Lama, I didn't like it as much. Then I went hiking and I went off the beaten track, and that's where I found my treasure island. And I thought, right, this is the next place I want to live in for sure.
So you've been thinking about this for a while. It wasn't a sudden decision by the sound of it.
No, for about 4 years. Yeah, for about 4 years.
It's all making sense. And then Bobsy can link in, his discovery of Lama. But first of all, I think it'd be great to hear his story, where he grew up, and all his adventures. There's plenty that we're going to discover soon.
Right. So I'm Lebanese by birth, English by blood, and Hong Kong by choice. So I've been in Hong Kong now almost 30 years, which is more than half my life. But I'm born and raised Lebanese, and I was 10 when the Civil War started. And I experienced almost 10 years of the Civil War from the age of 10 till 19. So all my teenage years were a war child, growing up in the war, being active in the war. We were carrying guns at the age of 11, 12, 13. Guns were even, taller than myself. But, got disheartened with the idea of war and, too attracted towards music and fashion. And then, by the age of 15, 16, we completely pulled away from the concept of fighting or being soldiers and fully embraced fashion and music and girls, of course, and all the things we were passionate about. And funnily enough, my first career, if you like, as an entrepreneur was in the fashion world, although I never really studied fashion. But I was always passionate about fashion. And then later on, when I had a chance to become an entrepreneur, the first thing I did was sell my apartment in England. By that time I'd moved to England. Raised a few pennies. It was just serendipity and luck that those were the Thatcher years where, I'd bought an apartment on a mortgage from the building society, and within 3 years I'd sold it and I'd made 11,000 sterling profit. This is from 85 to 87. It was just crazy time in the UK. Anyway, I took those 20,000 US dollars, whatever they were, and put them into my entrepreneurship, which was fashion, without any real background in fashion. And that's how my journey began as an entrepreneur. And it was a few years later where I had an awakening, or what I call a shift in consciousness, and just realized that we're literally killing our planet. This is 1989. And that, if we don't protect the planet, if we don't protect the environment, there's no hope for anything else. And I had this awakening when I was in Bangkok, having bankrupted my fashion company twice. I was on a limb in Bangkok, not knowing what to do. You know, the Berlin Wall was coming down. All these proxy wars all over the world were ending because the Cold War was ending. The Russians and Americans were making peace. And there was a people power awakening that not only brought down the Berlin Wall, but people were marching for LGBT rights against apartheid in South Africa. It was the rebirth of the modern environmental movement. You had Greenpeace was active and Amnesty International. You might recall, I think we're all of an age where we can remember the transformation that we went through between 87 and 94, 95. And I just kind of flipped with that and dedicated my life from there on to do something about raising environmental awareness. And being a fashion designer, that at that stage, I completely turned my company into an eco-fashion company. But back then we didn't have the same vocabulary. There was no words of sustainability and organic. Everything was called environmentally friendly. So I started an environmentally friendly fashion company in 89, 1990, and that eventually brought me to Hong Kong in late 92. And I really haven't looked back since in terms of what I do. And the bottom line is, as is mentioned in the small bio there, has been and only has been to raise environmental awareness. Whether that's been misunderstood or recognized or even noticed in Hong Kong, I don't really know. I've been involved in many things, but scratch the surface and you'll see that the prime motivation is to raise environmental awareness, is to inspire change, is to let people know that we only have one planet and only one planet, and we kill Mother Earth at our own peril. And I think humanity is waking up to what we call the climate crisis today, very, very quickly. And that's really been my mission for the last 30 years here in Hong Kong.
I like how, Josianne, you said you don't talk about being from one nationality or whatever. You're from the planet. And if you go to Bobsy's compound in Lama, he has a flag, and it's not a flag for a particular country. It's a flag of Mother Earth, right? So kind of ties in quite nicely. I think it might resonate with you as well. So it's interesting that, you guys have got such international lives, and, to some extent, I've done a little bit of that. My wife and I worked in London, and then we went back to Australia, and then we went to Singapore, and then we've been here. So we've been here 11 years in Hong Kong. We were 9 years in Singapore. But, what I love about Hong Kong is that how diverse the community is here. And in fact, we've got another friend, I think, that was living in Lama for a while, who did the Dear Hong Kong project. And I think you were part of that as well, Bobsy, where it's trying to capture every nationality on the planet that, lives here. And so Oscar was actually, we interviewed him as well a couple of times, I think, once solo, and then once when we had the founders of Mother's Choice and the CEO of Mother's Choice on a previous episode. So these conversations, for me, took sort of accelerated when we moved to Hong Kong. And, when I ended up writing this, it's kind of a collection of the people that I've kind of met more than anything. But also just a mindset of being open to these productive accidents, or saying yes to, to putting yourself at risk of these, really interesting people and experiences. And how I met Chris is an extension of that. Basically, around this time last year, I was finally getting myself organized to write the book, and I'd had the content for like 6 years. But it took one of Seth Godin's workshops called the Creatives Workshop to give me a framework for doing it, which was to create a 100-day streak. So, it was for people who were doing creative projects. So if you're a poet, pick up your pen and write a poem every day for 100 days. If you're a musician, pick up your guitar. For me, if I picked up my laptop and I wrote for 5 minutes, then I literally had a piece of cardboard beside the bed. I did a 10 by 10 grid. And if I picked up my laptop for 5 minutes, I put a dot. And 100 dots later, I'd finished the first draft, which was the grind, because I had so much content. It took a lot of editing and to make it all sort of make sense, because it's a spaghetti ball of experiences. But then through that, someone in that group of the creative workshop, there were about 400 people, I guess, collaborating virtually, mentioned a guy in New York who had a thing called Gratitude and Pasta. And he hosts dinners I think it's in Chelsea in New York. And I thought, well, I'm curious about gratitude. I sort of stumbled across the power of gratitude a few years earlier. And I reached out to the founder of that dinner series. And because it was COVID, he had gone from physical to virtual. And I said, well, okay, if you do this dinner at 7:47 p.m. New York, that's 7:47 a.m. Hong Kong, you do dinner, I'll have breakfast. And had a great experience with Chris Schembra. And I think a month later, he invited me back to go on another one of these dinner series. And I said, well, I think he provided 3 dates. He said, look, there's this month, this date, this date, this date. And I said, well, how about I go to all 3 of them, and each time I'll bring another friend. And I invited a Texan that lives in Taipei, another Chris Davis, to join, and he loved it so much that the following week he volunteered to give a guided walking tour of his neighborhood via Zoom. And I said, okay, well, that's another little spin-off project. Maybe I'll do Hong Kong the following week. So I did the Hong Kong the following week. And during that, Chris Schembra said, oh, you guys should meet Chris Palmore, who's got this thing about gratitude. And he literally just sent an email. I think he wrote connect, and that was it. Like, there was no other words. It was just, you guys just connect. And Chris and I met that way, and then it started to turn into the series of collaborations, including helping Chris to write a couple of books and to do these podcasts and everything else. But maybe we'll pause and let Chris introduce how he got involved in gratitude and all the projects that I guess that have evolved from that. I can hear a lot of jingling in the background. Is that you, Bobsy?
Uh-oh.
Wind chime?
So I'm playing with my balls.
Ah, they're quite noisy.
We had no idea, sorry.
It's all good. I was picturing wind chimes.
I was too.
They are actually. There's.
Okay.
Well, maybe put them in
Chinese
your pocket or something just for the time being.
Well,
Right,
thanks for that intro, Peter. I just want to thank Bobsy and Josianne for being here. It's really great to officially meet the two of you. And I've been painting. I'm a gratitude artist, a conductor, and an ambassador, and I've been painting with Peter for quite some time. And it was amazing that he, invited you guys into our collaboration in gratitude. And now we, the 4 of us, we have our own piece of artwork together, which is this book, But speaking back to, I do a lot of podcasting and talking to a lot of people, and I always love what I call basically like the gratitude building blocks at a moment, right? Like what are the building blocks? What are the moments in gratitude that had to happen for people to be in a room together, And I really like sharing those. So, in my experience, Peter shared a little bit about how him and I met, right? And when you think about these little, just from Peter's story, right? He had to be in that writing workshop, right? He had to be in that writing workshop. He had to read whoever posted about the thing in New York, right? He had to be present. Because if there's 400 people, that's a lot of content. I'm sure there was a lot of content. Now, granted, he might have read all of it. Doesn't mean he remembers half of it, right? Because that's how that works. But somehow he had because of the word gratitude, right? That's probably what it was. Who knows if he was skimming, but he saw the gratitude and he decided to take an action, right? So that was that little thread, right? That little thread. He's in Hong Kong. He's doing this book. He gets involved. He reads this thing. Next thing you know, he's met somebody new. We obviously know Peter well enough now to know that's what he does, which is great. And then through that, because he'd been connected to him, eventually somebody that I connected with on my side thought that we should meet, right? And he just shoots an email out, And I love those little threads. Obviously, there's a lot before that, but those are little threads. And on my end, obviously, I wrote a letter. You guys know I wrote a letter to my mother on my birthday many years ago, and to appreciate her in gratitude. And I had to write that letter, and obviously everything that came after that would mean 4 months later when she had passed away from cancer, all that had to happen for me to have the nugget of the idea of like, can I inspire other people to express their gratitude. That was the idea. Like, can I inspire other people, create a space to allow people to write in gratitude, to make a connection. And, writing that down, all these things, me working on this and the books and all that. But then we go up to last year, and, with me, it's another little thread, when you talk about these little threads, these little connectors. One day I'm going jogging and I decide I'm going to listen to Cal Fussman's podcast. And I like Cal, so don't get me wrong when I say this, but I reached out to Cal a couple times and he wouldn't give me an interview. That's okay. I know it's not personal. But, so I stopped listening to him just because it just, you know what I mean? Again, he's great, so don't get me wrong. But I opened it back up. I'm just pointing out because I opened it back up, which is the important part. And I'm scrolling through his list, and I see the word gratitude. So it's like very interesting. It's like I saw the word gratitude, and they're like, I go, okay, well, I'm going to listen to this interview, and it happens to be Chris Shimbra that's on Cal Fussman's podcast. And I'm jogging around the park, and I'm like, I got to talk to this guy because he's getting people together and creating space. And obviously, he's somebody that gets what we are doing very similar things. I'd love to talk to him. And then, long story short, I get to one of these gatherings and I meet him and have a great time. And I end up connecting with other people and having a very cool experience because I'd never experienced sharing gratitude and seeing people share gratitude in a digital world, like a connect, being connected inside of a digital space like that. He opened up a whole new, basically I had no idea that, you know what I mean? Like, you just don't know things exist until you're a part of them. I just would never have thought, oh, you're going to get a group of people together. They're going to open up and share moments in gratitude. And it's going to set an experience to creating the space that way. It really blew my mind. So much that, it really has affected me moving forward with a lot of the things I do. If it's gratitude bombs or gratitude birthday parties, or even having people share the love for their animals, in a space together. Very similar. The very concept still very similar. I'm just doing it where everyone can see it. I do it where I put the artwork on the wall. It's not a closed circuit, I guess to say. But speaking, so I had to have that experience, and then Chris, for some reason, had to think, Peter, Chris and Chris Davis, you guys should meet. And he just shoots this little email, which any of us could have completely ignored because it was so small. I think it was one sentence. When I should find that so we could read it, but it was literally like, what? Okay, I guess I'll respond to the. It was like, oh, he wants me to just respond to this email to these people. Like, it was so. There was nothing other than, you guys should meet. Here's the names. And we were all attached in the email chain. So, I connect with Peter and I read his book and I get him on the podcast. We talk about gratitude. And, Peter was the first person I co-anchored a podcast with, which changed everything for me as far as the podcasting. It was like, partners is where it's at. I want to meet new people. You know what I mean? Like the difficult, not the difficulty, but the real work is I just want to meet new people. Cool people. And if you can bring somebody in to be with you that knows the people and brings them in, like it's easy, which is the way it should be. So
what I like about how it's evolved is, you've got a platform like WhatsApp that just enables you to iterate in real time. So, you're either waking up and I'm going to, it's in the evening here or vice versa. And if we went through our history, you'll see, hey, what about this? What about that? And we're just doing these sort of lean startup in sort of real time. It's not really taking a lot of time. It's not really costing a lot of money, but helping each other to promote our books turned into sharing, the opportunity to write in your, Dear Gratitude book, and then Dear 2020. And then it's evolved into a series of podcasts related to productive accidents. And then we've done the virtual book tour. And, who knows where it's going to go. Even I really enjoy delivering copies of my book to people, particularly if I take it, there's an excuse to ride my bike, the Vespa motorbike around Hong Kong. So Josianne was one of the better examples where dropped it off out in Kennedy Town. And we're just standing on the side of this kind of busy road. And I don't think we've ever really had a proper conversation before. We knew of each other, but we ended up having this 1 hour conversation. By the end of it, we've got a series of collaborations that have just popped up, including, hey, I've got this friend who, is Vietnamese and she helps translate books. Do you want to get it done in Vietnamese? And that's exactly kind of what happened. And we were going to have Mei Ling on the episode, but she wasn't feeling well, so we'll have her another time. But, I just like these organic experiments and how they keep on evolving. Just like Bobsy, you've got Nana, which you haven't really spoken about yet, but it'd be good if you can maybe introduce that a little bit, as this series of restaurants that helping climate change through diet change, right? Is basically, I guess, the main message, and how you're hosting documentaries every Thursday evening about how to protect the planet. And every time I go there, I meet new collaborators, and all of these kind of, I guess, like-minded people. When you've got the mindset of, I'm just going to make sure that every interaction turns into a new adventure, it literally becomes very predictable and repeatable. So I'll pause there, and maybe Josianne can give her perspective, and then Bobsy, in terms of how you've seen this play out over time as well.
What, productive accidents in general?
Yeah, in general, yeah.
The thing is, so what do you call productive accidents? I used to refer as meaningful coincidences. It's the same thing, and I think if you meet people with an open mind and you are generally curious about the other, and open-minded about how you live your life and where you try and not try, the most amazing thing happens. So as you said, it was a fun conversation next to your Vespa by the side of the road. But I would say my whole life is a series of productive accidents and meaningful coincidences, even down to what I'm doing now. So had we spoken as a group a year ago, I would have presented myself as, well, I work in insurance, I do digital transformation, Now I've completely changed my life. I've become a coach, because what I want to do is help people literally realize how awesome they are, as opposed to walk around with their self-limiting beliefs. And in the process of switching, I have met the most incredible set of people in Hong Kong, and I thought I was well connected already. There was a whole group that I had just never come across. So yeah,
no regrets by the sound of it.
Definitely no regrets. I mean, it's a very different way of living, of course, right? And you end up having a very you end up actually paying more attention to your intuition. So what I'm finding myself is thinking less, listening more to myself, which is interesting. And surprisingly, you end up meeting people who are like that. So just by listening to 5 minutes to Bobsy, I now understand why you've mentioned several times saying you've got to meet this guy, you're gonna connect with him, and I get it. I totally get it. So that's another productive accident / meaningful coincidence. Sure.
Totally, and just the beginning. So, and Bobsy, how did you start your restaurants? I guess you've leapt from fashion into food. What was the how did that happen?
Peter, the great connector Williams, I like to call you. Peter has a magical way of just connecting people. Fashion and music were almost my first loves. And then I had a chance to become a fashion entrepreneur. And that brought me along. But being an eco-entrepreneur, I was equally passionate about raising environmental awareness, and I used fashion as a tool to do that. So simultaneously, when my first year on Llama, we founded Able Charity, and we started campaigning to save Llama, to Save the Bay campaign, and then we started a much bigger campaign called Save Llama. Josianne, you might not be aware of this, but they wanted to reclaim the entire harbor, all of it, Yongxiwan Harbor. Yeah, and they still do, but we stopped them. But it was in the midst of all of this, living on Llama, that, myself, I was vegetarian, my friends all around me were vegetarian, but there was really nowhere to eat on Llama. There was nothing remotely healthy. It was all seafood restaurants and like local Dai Pai Dongs. And the idea got floated that, hey, why don't we start a vegetarian cafe, And I was very attracted to that idea, having been a foodie. And of course, if you're born and raised in Lebanon, you have no choice. Food's in your blood, you know. And the conversation became, well, yeah, let's do it. So 10 of us got together for the first Wednesday meeting. And we said, okay, let's start a cafe. And who's got experience? Nobody. The next Wednesday, there was 7. The third Wednesday, there was 5 of us. And everyone was just dropping out, saying, listen, guys, I love you. I love the idea, but I really just don't have time. And this is a mammoth hill to climb. You know, who's going to be in the kitchen? Who's going to operate it? I've got kids. I've got business. I don't have money, you know, whatever it is. And eventually, it was just 3 of us really left. 2, in fact, and 2 satellite people around us. And we started the Bookworm Cafe on Llama Island just after the handover, that period of 97 going into 98. And it was a fearful time for Hong Kong people, quite similar to what's going on now. There was a massive exodus of Hong Kong people leaving because communist China was going to take over, and who knew what. But it wasn't on my radar at all. So we opened the Bookworm, and it was arguably Hong Kong's first organic, bohemian, hippie, zero waste, zero food waste, wonderful community center. So we had a lot of talks and events and happenings, and that kind of made me acutely and very strongly aware of the power of food and how you can influence people through their bellies straight into their hearts. And I used Bookworm Cafe as a tool to raise awareness with lots of did you knows, and the menus were just diagrams of how much water is consumed in 1 pound of beef and how much deforestation is happening, and there was blackboards everywhere. It was beautiful. And essentially that's what I ended up doing most of the time. The environmental work was still happening and a bit of fashion on the side. But I was fully dedicated into running the Bookworm Cafe, which meant opening at an early hour and closing at a very late hour, 7 days a week. It's an exhausting lifestyle. But I was so empowered that a small cafe like that could have such a big impact on Hong Kong. We became very, very famous and very, very popular very quickly. Maybe over 100 articles were written about that period in the Bookworm Cafe. And I said, whoa, you know, food is the way forwards here. So now, many decades later, it's Mana, and our main drive is diet change, not climate change. So that's been our main push, to raise awareness about the diet, i.e. how humanity grows its food, delivers its food, and consumes its food, has become by far the #1 cause directly to the climate crisis. Not marginally. You know, some scientists talk about over 50% of deforestation, desertification, depletion of oceans, contamination of water, displacement of cultures, communities, indigenous cultures. They cite over 50% is coming from our diet. So we've been championing diet change, not climate change, through Mana here in Hong Kong. Currently, we have 2 big restaurants and a rather large production kitchen. But like everyone else, we've been hit by 2 years of loss and business loss, and it's been tough. But that journey with food started in the late 90s, if you like, and has continued ever since. And it's just brilliant to see that our customers are getting younger and younger, and you know, you're getting Gen Z people coming in and just understanding the culture behind Mana, and not just coming to eat the food. The food is good, of course, and tasty and inexpensive, and it ticks many boxes. But the main drive is that all our packaging is compostable. All our food waste, all the leftovers by customers, gets composted here in Hong Kong.
And now, you'll be happy to hear, Chris, it's only a 5-minute walk from where we live here. So when you visit eventually, when travel does actually happen again, you'll be there. And the other great thing I love is the Zen Den, which is, you know, event space upstairs, and I can see plenty of possibilities for more content there, not just not just the documentaries, but Pekakucha could be an event space for that, and House of Beautiful Business would be a great space to have something there as well. So all of these little collaboration opportunities keep on emerging. So that's what I'm excited about, and they're starting to, I guess, gradually happen. But hopefully next year, maybe, or later this year, it'll accelerate.
Yeah, the spaces for the community, it's available.
Yeah. I was just thinking, we're getting sort of towards the last, whatever it is, 15 minutes or so. Shall we jump across to invite Josianne to read her letter? I think you've only written in one of the books. Is that right, Josianne? Not both of them. I think I introduced Dear 2020 to you, not Dear Gratitude.
Yeah, Dear 2020. It's in there.
Page 8.
Page 8. Okay. You want me to read?
Go for it.
Okay. My letter, I've got to say. Dear 2020, thank you for giving me the opportunity to slow down, reflect, reassess aspects of my life, and for making beneficial changes in the most unusual of circumstances. In truth, 2019 had been quite tough, both on personal and professional levels. I felt exhausted mentally, physically, and emotionally. I joined an intense yoga retreat in India for the first time in late January, which allowed me to start recharging my batteries. I returned home to Hong Kong shortly before the first lockdown. We've experienced several lockdowns since, resulting in the inability to make business travels, which the previous year took 80% of my time. Soon after the shock of our world turned upside down and getting over the drama of toilet paper hoarding, we all organized ourselves. I was fortunate enough to have my family and friends spared from COVID, for which I am very grateful. Despite working longer hours, I enjoyed more leisure time than usual, which I mostly spent in my own company. Unexpectedly, I discovered that I was an introvert and thoroughly enjoyed this experience. Initially, I slept a lot, then slept some more, then decluttered my belongings, my relationships, my digital assets. A most cathartic experience. I also reconnected with my love of sewing and completed several quilting projects. These included memory quilts to celebrate the lives of two gentlemen. One was a colleague and the other, the father of a friend. Quilting is an alien concept here in Hong Kong. Despite this, a few colleagues joined me in creating 3 quilts for the 3 children of our deceased colleague. They learned to sew, and we took turns in progressing the project over 5 months, helping everyone through the grieving process, as well as in managing the anxiety introduced by the omnipresent pandemic. Completing this project offered the families a lovely memento and supported their grieving process in a gentle way. I will remember you as brutal, confronting, and uncertain, balanced out with a gentle wave of kindness, empathy, and compassion. 2020. You were the first year in my working life where going to the office rather than working from home was considered a luxury. The year of several paradigm shifts. You allowed me the mind space to refocus more clearly on what matters in life. Importantly, you reminded me of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's words of wisdom. The essential is invisible to the eye. Lesson learned.
Very good.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jess.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to write.
Can I interject? Thank you so much for reading that. When Peter put out a call to people, asking them to write, I was just I'm so overwhelmed by Peter's friendship, and you guys know that he likes to connect people and he likes to put stuff out there in the world. And I was just curious. So I'm very honored when I received your letter. I just want to let you know it really touched me when stuff comes in, and I know that I create the space through Peter and we create the space. And then here's this beautiful letter, right? This honest letter. And I was just curious. I mean, I know we met briefly. That the way we met was kind of a productive accident too, with the House of Beautiful People thing that Peter did. So you got to hear a little bit of my story. But I was curious, when he contacted you, did he send you an email? Did he call you? And then were you a little hesitant, or were you like, oh yes? Or I'm just kind of curious what that was like.
No. It was on that infamous book delivery conversation that he brought the subject up, and So I've always grown up with the conscious decision to be grateful. So at home, for instance, so I was the first of 4 children, and for as long as I can remember, it was part and parcel of dinner for my mom to start dinner with, tell us 3 things that you're grateful for. So we were brought up with optimism and gratitude. So when Peter mentioned it, I just thought, oh, that's really sweet. Yeah, of course I'd like to take part in support. And that's how it started. What I didn't realize is that I would take a bit of time to really reflect and generally think about that year, which was definitely a most unusual one, but with the decision to take the silver lining out of it, as opposed to focus on the uncertainty, the chaos. And I've got to say that now, anytime I see someone with a big bag of toilet paper, I can't help smiling. You know what I mean? It's just like, I've never seen the entire planet Earth obsessed with toilet paper to the point that we were. So yes, very good. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Again, I really appreciate it. That's my whole thing is inspiring the space. And like I said, when the letters are coming in from you all, I just felt so overwhelmed by the whole thing. That's what I just want to create space, so that just happens all the time. So when it happens, I'm like very, very, very freaking touched. So I sincerely thank you.
Yeah, keep going. It's very good.
The other little collaboration that we spoke about is converting productive accidents into a quilt as well, which is going to happen because we imagined it that day. And there's going to be, there's 11 chapters or, 10 actionable insights. We'll do a 4x4 grid, and there'll be an icon for each insight, and that'll become another project. And I also bought a heavy-duty sewing machine, as you saw. I posted on Productive Accidents on Instagram recently, and that's also to complete a few projects that I've been thinking about for a long time. But I need to learn how to use it. So, we need to have a workshop whenever you're ready.
Happy to show you. You'll see it's dead easy, and it's a most wonderful machine.
Excellent.
For sure.
Thank you so much.
And
actually, that is an unexpected link to Bobsy. So Bobsy, you were into fashion. Yeah. I'm also into sewing, but not fashion, quilting.
And sewing machine is a powerful tool.
Absolutely, it's wonderful. Wonderful.
Well, speaking of fashion, our first angel investment was into an independent fashion designer who came and spoke at TEDx in Hong Kong, and then Lisa Crosswhite, or now Lisa Von Tang, she went back to Singapore, created a thing called Nossum, and she was basically curating independent designers from across Asia that had the passion to make really beautiful handcrafted things, but didn't really have the energy or probably not even interested to create an online presence. So she basically curated a lot of that. And even though that initial business ended up failing, it had a lot of other benefits that were kind of priceless. Like our 2 oldest daughters ended up going and doing internships with her. She became a mentor, kind of big sister type thing. And, I'm sure that experience is going to be useful for our children over time. And now that they're both in Melbourne and one is about to start her first job. And anyway, it's just interesting how, like you said, if you follow what you're really interested in, like today I was excited about the Olympics with BMX freestyle being in for the first time, and a guy from Brisbane winning the gold medal. And I met him in Montpellier in France a few years ago when I went across to the Festival International Sport Extreme. And so I've got this photo of us standing together. Didn't really know he was going to win an Olympic medal, but here we are. So one day I'll reconnect with him as well. Anyway, Bobsy, your letter.
Right. So let me begin with the second one, which is Dear 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a short poem that I'd been thinking about for quite some time, in a sense. And when this opportunity came to thank Dear 2020 in relation to COVID, I jumped at it. I've been calling COVID-19 the Great Awakener. Whether that's misunderstood or not, I'm not sure, but I truly believe COVID-19 has woken us up to the peril and the crisis in which we're in. So the poem is called 2020, Eco-Sanity or Ecocide. Eco-Sanity or Ecocide. The big question on my mind in 2018 was pondering the depth of where we'd been. Looming large and wide was eco-sanity or ecocide. By which of the two would humanity abide? Then along came COVID-19 in 2020, with stress, anxiety, and fear aplenty, shaking people up from their sleepy slumber, questioning their values to keep or to plunder, and saving humanity from its blind vanity, illuminating a path to eco-sanity, emerging from a destructive paradigm at the 11th hour and just in time. So I honestly believe that COVID-19 or COVID-21 or whatever the COVIDs are going to be is our chance to choose eco-sanity over ecocide. It's definitely a turning point. And I've seen many people all over the world shaken to the core about COVID-19 and how it's caught humanity completely unaware to do anything. God help us if this was a true disaster, a true environmental catastrophe, or a true virus that was killing people on a much wider scale. What would we be doing? It's really caught us with our pants down, with our knickers around our ankles, as the English like to say, you know. So that was my poem to COVID-19 2020.
That's beautiful, man. Thank you so much. I loved hearing you read that, and it's again a whole other side of the way to look at the year and what's going on in the world. So that's what's so brilliant about it. It's so you.
Thank you. I mean, it doesn't mean I don't sympathize with the people who've fallen ill or have had COVID or have lost loved ones, or not at all. It's just from a big picture perspective, I think COVID is a chance for humanity to wake up. And shame on us if we don't take it. The gratitude, the first one, which was a true story called Trust. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, please.
All right. So, one of the most profound, long-lasting lessons I've ever learnt came from my encounter with a street beggar in Hong Kong back in 1993. One early evening, I was rushing to catch my ferry back to Llama Island, an outlying island here in Hong Kong where I live. I only had 10 minutes to make it to the gates. As I rushed along the Exchange Square footbridge, my eyes made contact with the street beggar, whom I'd often spotted sitting quite serenely amongst people's busy feet in the midst of their oblivion to his presence. The serenity in his eyes made me stop in my rush, and I automatically proceeded to give him the only $10 in my pocket, and in my bank account for that matter. I was aware that I was giving away my last pennies and my own, like the right thing to do. The ferry ride back in those days was 9.5 Hong Kong dollars. Without thinking twice, I smiled at him and continued on my way to ferry pier number 4. Upon arriving at the ferry gates, the fact that I had no money to get on board made me smile to myself in amusement at my predicament. Fortunately, I spotted a friend boarding the ferry and asked him nicely if he would lend me 10 Hong Kong dollars to get home. He did, and I got home safe and sound to my lovely farmhouse, which I was renting in North Llama back then. Even though I had no more money, I felt quite serene and liberated. A sense of freedom washed over me, and I felt rather empowered, because there I was, penniless, not worried or anxious, or too concerned about what came next. A sense of peace put me to bed that night. The next morning, I woke up as usual and went to check on my letterbox at the end of the charming path. Lo and behold, there was an envelope with a check made out to me in the princely sum of 10,000 Hong Kong dollars. That bright sunny morning, overlooking the South China Sea, I learned the power of trust.
That was awesome, man. Thank you for reading that. Love that.
Welcome, welcome.
So good. What I really like about
Trust and flow, isn't it?
yeah,
Believe in the
it
flow.
reminds me of Gino a little bit. You know, we interviewed him on a previous episode. Gino, when he does his evolving caravan experience where he goes off to Europe, you know, I think, I'm not sure if it's is it exactly this way, but definitely some of the people that he's introduced me to, like Adrian Bellick, the filmmaker, and so on, they buy one-way tickets and they go to an event that resonates. It could be on consciousness, or it could be on, you know, I think he did one on, Adrian did one on happiness, and he just meets people that turn into these, you know, these experiences, and people invite them to stay with them, and you know, help them get to the next town, and invite them to speak at events and things like that. And you know, I guess that's an extension of what you're talking about, Bobsy. And I know you've interviewed, I think, Gino. He's probably told you about some of those stories in a similar way.
Indeed. Yes, yes. It's learning how to trust that I found to be the key, and that was, you know, a big lesson for me. But somehow it seemed that my intuition had known about this beforehand, and I couldn't have predicted a check for $10,000, but I was in peace, and I had found my peace. And if we can only learn how to trust, and by trust, I mean not trusting in our abilities, because we've all got, you know, great talents and great flaws, but the same trust that puts your feet on solid ground in the morning when you get out of bed, the same trust that opens that tap of water and lo and behold comes out clean water. That kind of trust, if we can find it, and it's within us, it's our birthright, it's an innate part of unconscious and higher consciousness. If we can only tap into that, I think the world would be a much more beautiful and flowy and happy and successful place.
That's beautiful. It makes me think of, you know, if we could, it's almost like you're turning off fear. Like it's like you don't have the fear. Like your story is like you didn't have fear of getting home. You knew you would get home. That way because you didn't have fear, you could go, well, hey, this guy needs this. He needs it more than me right now because I'm gonna get home, right? Like you don't have fear about it, and then there you go, right? Because you didn't, you know, you're walking without fear. Like feel like a big way to find gratitude in someone's heart and their life is to like stop worrying and stop the fear and worry, right? That takes us out of the moment, stops us from seeing all the good and appreciating life in the moment. So
Indeed.
Your story shares that. So.
And our greatness is on the other side of fear.
Right.
That's where we encounter our greatness.
Right.
But it's not part of the materialism paradigm, as you may be familiar. It's not what we're taught at school. It's not what our parents teach us. It's not what we see in the workforce. It's not what we encounter when we go to university. But I think in the emerging consciousness paradigm, this will be a normal, you know, human quality that we have. But we just need to be taught it somehow. A lot of us learn it through experience and in life and what have you, but it can be taught. Intuition can be taught. It's like a muscle, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think we get a sense of that in the people that we meet, right? So I was helping to host TEDx talks, and one of the people that I was helping was a guy called Patrick Ip, who grew up in California, but he's got grandparents here in Hong Kong, and he was over here visiting, and someone said, oh, this person would be a great People's Choice speaker. You know, can you have a chat with him and see? And, you know, we had a Skype call back then and clicked, and he did a great talk. He was very well presented, very well prepared. And then, you know, once a year or so, he comes back and visits Hong Kong. And I think by then I was connected to him on Facebook or Instagram, and I saw that he was playing tennis in California. So I said, okay, well, next time you come into town, we'll create a tradition. We'll have a game, and we'll catch up for breakfast or something. And on one of the trips, he said, oh, by the way, when I was in undergraduate, I went across I was studying in Paris, and one weekend I went across to London, and I had two friends that were living there. One was a former high school friend, one was a former mentor. And he said, okay, well, look, the three of us can have dinner. That's interesting. But how about each of you? He challenged each of them to find 5 of their most interesting contacts. And he said, look, they don't have to know each other, but let's just bring about 10 people together. Keep it small enough so that people can all get to know each other. And the theme is going to be, how do we solve the world's problems? Something small, But 10 people did show up, and they probably had low expectations. But because they were curious enough to go to a random event like that and to put themselves at risk of these kind of productive accidents, they found shared interests. They started collaborating, and Patrick went, you know what, that was pretty cool. Every time I go to a new city, I'm going to do the same thing. And he called it Baller Dinners, and 1,700 people later, there's this amazing community. But it's not for everyone. And I've found that when I've spoken at events, there might be 100 people, and I'll always introduce Baller Dinners, which has evolved into 3 questions. Instead of asking the usual question at a conference, which is, what do you do? It's the opposite of that. It's like, look, what is your story? I don't care what you do. I just want to hear, your life journey. And the next big question is, okay, what projects are you working on? What do you care about? And it could be personal, could be professional. And then the third question is where the magic kind of happens, and it sets the whole, I guess, culture of this community. And it's, how can I help? Okay, so you've told me what you care about. Hopefully that's the projects that you're working on. What would help take that project to the next level? And if you can articulate that, then maybe it might trigger an idea in me or somebody that I know that I might be able to introduce to you. And it's like this, the power of being a go-giver, where, we interviewed Bob Berg, who wrote this book about being a go-giver, which is kind of a parable about, instead of being a go-getter, which is a selfish kind of act, be generous. And the more you give, obviously, you quickly realize the more you get over time. And that's the power of this. But so Patrick, when we did a road trip in California, end of 2019, he picked me up at the airport, picked me up at our hotel the next morning. We went and played tennis. We always have these evolving conversations. And it's probably one of the best things I've discovered. But through that, I've met so many other amazing people. Whenever they're passing through Hong Kong, if Patrick says, hey, this person you should catch up with, I'll just reschedule whatever is happening that day as much as possible and have those conversations. And that's where so much magic keeps on happening. It's become so predictable, repeatable, 8 out of 10 times. But if I speak at an event with 100 people, and I describe how useful this community has been, maybe 1 or 2 people might come up afterwards and say, hey, I really want to go to one of those dinners. I don't understand why the 98%, the other 98 aren't interested. I'm curious, but clearly, there's something that in terms of intuition that you might be talking about, or mindset, etc. But somehow we've kind of found each other, and that's what I think this podcast kind of represents, and all the other projects that we're working on that will continue to evolve and expand, I'm sure. Anyway, just thoughts at this stage.
When's the next dinner, Peter?
We can do it whenever you want to host one. In fact, how about you and Josianne? You are going to be co-hosts. Invite 5 of your most interesting contacts. Hopefully, I get a Guernsey somehow and I can come along. And it's a fun project. The Zen Den is a perfect venue, for these conversations. So that's going to be a follow-up. In fact, I love how towards the end of every episode, we start to see all of these collaborations start to evolve. So I always say there's got to be at least one that comes out of the episode. Most recently, I had a call with someone where I had a sense that we might get to 3 collaborations within a 1-hour conversation, and we stretched and we got to 5. And I think it's a good to have a target to say, look, Okay, it's either 1, 3, or 5. There's no 2s, there's no 4s. If you can get to 2, you've got to be able to go to 3. If you can get to 3, you've got to be able to go to 5. You know, so okay, let's use the last few minutes to see what we can do. So the quilt is a follow-up. I think Bobsy, you could probably design a pretty good quilt as well.
Well, I like the idea of that sewing machine at yours.
Yeah, we could have a sewing session wherever and whenever. So that's probably number 3 that we've got there. What else can we do?
I want to host a co-host with Bobsy and you a gratitude event at the Zen Den. So whenever I can get out there, I don't know what that looks like, but maybe it's a live podcast where we're all together in the same space and we have an audience, which would be really cool, even if it's only 5 people, right? It doesn't even matter. It could be 1 person, but you know, we can share some gratitude stories and actually engage with some people, maybe bring them up if they are to share some things and have like a full-on engagement inside the Zen Den. I think that would be fantastic. I would love that. And if not, I'm just happy to come hang out at Bobsy's place.
Yeah, man.
I'm going to write some of these things down.
Be part of that my big idea is having a gratitude tour in Hong Kong. So obviously that could be an element of that idea. But I just want to come visit all you all. I want to inspire some gratitude, collect a lot of moments, and be there, you know. So just trying to figure out what the easiest pathway to that is, right?
You'll be well hosted and well looked after.
I know it. I'm excited.
You like it. You like the vibes in this city.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm writing these things down.
2021. We're going to do that. On. I think the first gratitude space like tour or like world event should be in Hong Kong. Just letting you guys know. I'm just stating that right now. So I think whatever that looks like, if it's a week worth of events or if it's a night, whatever, right? Like I think it should be in Hong Kong because Peter's a great host. You guys are there. I know there's some great people and there's a lot of possibilities there. So
good idea.
Just making
Let's
the statement.
do it. Yeah, man.
Because collaboration is key, and we got that's all I'm looking. I just letting you guys know. I know you know this, but I'm just looking for people to collaborate to create spaces for gratitude. So that's all I want to do all day long. So that's speaking of that, coming there to your all's homes area and creating space and letting the magic happen is that's my happy spot.
Cool.
Is there going to be a 3rd book, Dear 2021?
I'd like to do the same format. It just won't have my elongated story. Maybe I'll just write like an essay like everybody else being. So ideally, I would like to, if we can get another group of, yes. How about that, Bobsy? Yes.
Yes, definitely. So I think it should be a recurring tradition for sure.
So maybe in October, November, I could put something together. We could all just kind of share out, allowing people to know this is happening again, and see what who sparks the idea to want to take part.
I was at an event, a work event on Friday evening, and I was describing, how people that I haven't seen from the office for a while. We had a gathering at a colleague's home, and I got quite a few questions about writing books, and I said, well, you know what, the training wheels way to do it is to write an essay for someone else's book, and then you can say, look, I'm published, and that plants the seed for okay, if I can do 1 chapter, why can't I do 10? And so even Alia from Mother's Choice, I've been challenging her to write her story, and she said, look, I'm taking 3 weeks off in July. And it was 31st of July, and I remembered the conversation, and I wrote to her just yesterday, and I said, okay, so how are we looking? And she said, well, yeah, I've started documenting the chapters of my life, at least for my children. And I said, look, all you need is a title and the chapters and the insights and a few examples, and that's it. You've got it. So I'm sure that is going to happen. And then the fun thing is, okay, if you think of it in those terms, okay, here are the chapters of my life so far. The next question is, okay, what should happen next? And that's something we should always be asking to ourselves, right? And I'm going to follow up with that dinner question. So for Josianne and Bobsy, how could we help advance what you care about, the projects you're working on, and take them to the next level? Let's pretend we've just had the 3 questions at the dinner. What do you want to take to the next level, in your current projects?
Can you tell us in 1 minute, because Peter and I have another podcast we have to do.
Yeah,
Sure. Well, there's a lot going on, so it'll probably require the dinner to do that, Peter. But I want to thank you, Peter, for connecting me with Nusha, because I am writing a book called Memoirs of a War Child, Beirut, 1975 to 1985.
Yes.
And Nusha, the editor, is chasing me. What a great feeling for an unpublished writer to be chased by an editor saying, listen, I've read 2 of your stories. Come on, write more, write more. So about, twice a month, she sends me an email saying, how's the writing? Keep writing, So that's thanks to you,
That's
Peter.
amazing.
I've written seven chapters already. Yeah.
I met Nusha through Chris, and she's chasing me.
She's the one that edited the 2 books, my 2 books. She's awesome.
There you go. Boom, boom.
So, Josianne,
awesome.
whenever you're ready to write that book, we've got an editor for you. And
Sounds
everyone
good.
that I've met, yeah, it's seriously, she's great, and she's chasing me. She wants to turn Productive Accidents into some children's books as well. I'm like, let's do it.
Into a Netflix series.
Well, why not, right? Why not? All of this.
Actually, if you want to turn it into a children's book, I've got a great illustrator who I could introduce you to.
There's another one.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, Peter, you have any closing thoughts before I hit our little promo that none of y'all have seen?
Josianne, what do we need to help you?
I'll give you the same answer as Bobsy. I think there's so many things going on that let's have a dinner. I've already got 4 people in my head, so it will definitely happen, and I'll give you the full list.
Perfect. All right. The dinner is happening in August. By the end of August, we'll have that first one.
Well, let's say September.
Sorry?
September.
You
August
don't want to do it in August?
Pretty much full. September.
You're full? Okay, no problem.
And I think you should record that so I can watch it, okay?
We'll do a Zoom at some stage as part of the event.
Well, hey, this has been great. So, let's do it again soon. We have a lot of things to work on, so we'll have to do a recap again later. And so I'm Chris with Peter and Bobsy and Josianne. They have a lot to be grateful for, and just get out there and have conversations and be fearless. And we are out.